Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift all the way back to the banks of the Nile where lotus blossoms bloom, the pyramids scrape the skies, and the smell? Well, let's just say you wouldn't want to stand downwind of a priest after a midday stroll, unraveling the dusty, unexpected story of how ancient Egyptians, yes, it's the same folks who wrapped up their dead with obsessive carousel, got serious about dental hygiene. And at the heart of this oddly soothing tale, burnt bread crumbs. That's right, while you might think of toothpaste as a peppermint-scented swirl in a plastic tube. Thousands of years ago, the road to oral cleanliness began with literal toast gone wrong. Tonight, you'll hear how these burnt crumbs mingled with ground iris petals, salt, and the occasional dab of donkey hooves created something that resembles very loosely what you brush with before bed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing bedtime from every time zone. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Memphis, not the one with barbecue and blues, but the original city of white walls, buzzing with linen robes, donkey carts, hay, and gossip that somehow always finds its way back to the pharaoh. You walk through the winding alleys near a baker's quarter. Warm, yeasty air rises from the kilns, thick with flour dust. A loaf hits the coals a moment too long. It blackens, hardens, and someone, probably an overworked apprentice, tosses it aside. But instead of trashing it, a sharp-eyed scribe collects the charred bits in a woven basket, because in Egypt, nothing goes to waste. Cleanliness isn't just about looking sharp for temple ceremonies or warding off flies. It's deeply spiritual. It's approach the gods, smelling like yesterday's onions or reeking of sweat. Unthinkable. Bathing, shaving, scenting, and yes, cleaning your teeth are all steps on the sacred path. Your feet shuffle across sun-baked clay tiles. A young woman powders her underarms with natron salts while a servant gently scrapes a dull blade over her scalp to maintain that famously bald and breezy Egyptian look. Nearby, a priest is rubbing his gums with a rough powder part ritual. It's part remedy and completely uncomfortable. Here's the deal. Egypt's climate is merciless. Dry, hot, gritty winds sweep over cities, making everyone a bit crusty by mid-afternoon. People sweat a lot. And when you're surviving on diets heavy in onions, garlic, dried fish, and barley beer, well, let's just say deodorant and toothpaste weren't optional. Enter the proto-toothpaste. The earliest mixes are surprisingly creative, scraping together ashes, powdered ox hooves, crushed eggshells, and, you guessed it, burnt bread. That crunchy corner of carbonized crust you toss out today. Asterisk. In ancient Egypt, it was a cleansing tool. Its abrasive edge could scour the grime right off your molars, or at least make you feel like it did. Historians still argue whether these gritty concoctions were intended more for ritual purity than actual dental health, but the results were, if not pleasant, at least effective, enough to keep the population's teeth from falling out entirely. Mostly, you move past a water boy pouring lotus-infused rinse over a nobleman's feet. Even children are taught early to rub their teeth with salt, charcoal, or dried mint leaves. It's as routine as slipping on a linen tunic in the morning. In fact, schoolboys often carry their own chew sticks tucked into their waist sashes. Still, despite the daily effort, archaeological digs show you just how rough these early smiles were. Teeth worn flat, enamel stripped by sand-infused bread, and cavities you could lose a scarab in. Yikes. Even so, these people took pride in their scent, their smile, their whole appearance. One courtier writes in his diary, "The breath of my beloved is sweet as lotus wine." It's either a romantic metaphor, a woman who knew her way around a breadcrumb paste. As you trail along the edge of a canal, the breeze shifts, carrying the scent of cinnamon and myrrh from the open market. You imagine reaching for your own little bag of powdered ash and salt, ready to face the gods, or at least your mother, in a log with breath that wouldn't knock over a stone sphinx. And just beyond the market, in a shadowy courtyard lined with painted tiles, a group of women pass around a small ivory box. Inside, a mix of powdered frankincense, crushed shells, and the inevitable burnt bread. They laugh softly, rubbing it on their teeth with fingertips or folded linen. One grimaces, 2 salty, other shrugs. Better than the beer burps, she says. Even among the chatter, you notice something else, a quiet kind of care. This isn't just about vanity. It's about identity, dignity. A clean mouth means a clean offering. A clean body is a holy one. And so, the story of Toothpaste begins not in some shiny lab, but here in smoky courtyards, beside bread ovens, between the grindstones and the temple doors, with burnt bread, dusty fingers, and the unshakable belief that every part of you, even your breath, should honor the gods. You're still in ancient Memphis, and now the air is heavier, not just with heat, but with the temps of fermentation. You're walking past a different kind of workshop this time, one that doesn't serve the stomach, but the spirit. Jars line the walls, some filled with thick green goo, others with powders, the color of dried roses or desert dust. This is where medicine meets magic, where healers grind, mix, and mutter under their breath. The Egyptians didn't just stumble into toothpaste out of boredom. No, you're seeing a society that's obsessed with balance between life and death, body and soul, gods and mortals. And in this balance, the mouth plays a surprisingly central role. The foul odor wasn't just gross, it was dangerous. Some believed it invited evil spirits. Others thought it could offend a god so deeply that your afterlife plans would be canceled. Your bad breath might literally cost you eternity. So what do? You turn to the specialists, the Sun or physicians, trained in both practical remedies and rituals. These weren't your local snake oil peddlers. They were educated, respected, and sometimes even embedded in royal courts. One hand on a patient's jaw, the other reaching for crushed iris root. They straddled science and superstition with surprising ease. A little boy sits nearby, his cheek puffed out, grimacing as his mother rubs a powder along his gum line. The mixture smells like dried flowers and ash. He winces, but doesn't complain. He's seen what happens when rot sets in a cousin whose swollen jaw was lanced with a copper knife, the infection oozing out, while priest whispered purification spells. You don't forget that kind of thing, and you certainly don't want to be next. Historians still argue whether these early dentists truly understood decay or just guessed based on smell and swelling. But either way, they were onto something. Their recipes preserved in faded papyrus scrolls, like the Ebers. Papyrus list ingredients we now know have antibacterial properties. Myrrh, natron, frankincense, crushed menthol, capable of freshening the breath and soothing inflamed gums. Add a pinch of burnt bread, and you've got exfoliation and spiritual assurance in one go. You watch as a healer tosses a chunk of stale bread directly onto hot coals. It blackens instantly, smoke curling up with the scent of wheat and bitterness. Then it's removed, pounded into powder, and mixed with ground ox hooves. Yes, hooves. Apparently, in ancient Egypt, everything had a second act, including your breakfast. And don't forget the salt. Egyptian salt wasn't like your shaker at home. This was natron naturally occurring, sun-dried, mineral-rich, and slightly soapy. It was used in mummification, bathing, even for brushing teeth. So yeah, if it was good enough to preserve Aunt Nefertari's organs for the afterlife, it was good enough for your molars. There's a little trick some healers do. They hold a mirror up to a patient's mouth, not to show them the inside, but to let the spirits see it. Clean teeth, clean soul. One priest even claimed that Osiris judged a man's soul by the state of his tongue. You better believe people took their morning routine seriously after hearing that. And here's your quirky tidbit for the night. One ancient recipe included crushed mouse bones. Yep, mouse bones. Now, whether that was a legitimate medical belief or just some bored healer flexing his creativity, we may never know. But it definitely gives gritty texture a whole new meaning. Back outside, a camel trudges past with sacks of salt and herbs strapped to its sides. You can almost imagine someone shouting, "Hey, did you pick up the coriander and donkey hoof powder?" Like a prehistoric pharmacy run. As you make your way into a wealthier district, things get more sophisticated. In one home, the mistress dabs a fine powder onto her teeth using a small bronze stick. The mixture smells like roses and sandalwood floral, but also faintly like toasted rye. It's artisanal dental care, 1300 BC style, and she isn't just brushing for herself. It's believed that one woman, the daughter of a vizier, created custom blends for her entire household. The scribe got extra mint for concentration. The guards, lots of natron, apparently to keep their battle breath at bay. Everyone had a flavor. Ancient personalization. Let's take that. Whitening strips. This obsession with oral cleanliness wasn't isolated to a few households. It extended into temples. Priests were required to maintain extreme hygiene, which included brushing, rinsing, and even plucking stray body hair. Before performing rituals, they'd purify their mouths with mixtures so astringent they'd make your gums cry. But hey, if the gods are listening, better not greet them with onion breath. You pause in the shadow of a temple, its columns towering above you. Even here, amongst sacred chants and incense, the ancient equivalent of mouthwash sits in alabaster jars. A mix of honey, salt, and mint, sweet and stingy. It's applied before speaking prayers aloud. Every syllable needs to leave a clean mouth. Imagine your local pastor swishing Listerine before each sermon. There's even evidence, though scholars still debate this, that some pharaohs traveled with personal hygienists. Imagine being so royal, you have a guy whose only job is to say, "Sire, your teeth need a little ashen time." And if you're thinking that's extra, well, welcome to Egypt, the land of gold, sandals, and burnt bread, toothpaste. You circle back to the riverbank now, where children play and a grandmother sips on barley water. Okay, her teeth are nearly worn flat, not from decay, but from a lifetime of sand-laced bread. The Egyptian milling process was brutal. Grit from grinding stones often made its way into loaves, slowly sandpapering teeth down to nubs. So, even if they brushed every day, it was like flossing with a nail file. Still, they tried. Every burnt crumb, every twig chewed to a pulp, every bitter rinse was a step closer to staying alive longer. Speaking more sweetly, Andith, the priests were returning your place among the stars. You lean back, the scent of frankincense clinging to your robe, and imagine waking tomorrow, reaching for a small bowl of powder and beginning the day with salt, ash, and a whisper of rose petals on your breath. You're moving now through the outer edges of the city, but the hum of daily life has quieted into the rhythm of the Nile. Fishermen pull in their nets. The sky ripples with golden clouds, and just beyond the palm trees, smoke drifts lazily from a cluster of clay ovens where the magic of burnt bread begins. No one sets out to burn bread, least not at first, but in ancient Egypt, accidents have a habit of becoming innovation. And it's here, in the humble bakeries of workers and slaves and temple staff, that your toothpaste story starts to crisp around the edges. You slip inside one of the bakeries. It's dim, smoky, warm. A man is scraping something black and brittle off the inner wall of a kiln. Not angrily, no cursing, or tossing things across the room. It's collecting it, carefully, reverently. You glance into the basket and realize it's charred bread. It's purposefully overbaked loaves, cracked open like desert stones. Side, blackened, crumb-light, ashy, and sharp-smelling. Exactly what the scribe ordered. See, someone, somewhere, maybe out of desperation, maybe by pure curiosity, noticed that burnt bread, when ground into powder, had a mild, abrasive texture, not so coarse as to tear gums, not so soft as to be useless, just enough grit to scrub. And in a culture where bread was life, even its failure had value. Historians still argue whether this was a top-down invention commissioned by palace healers, if it bubbled up from ordinary folk, passed hand to mouth until scribes wrote it down. What we do know, the recipe made it into the scrolls. Again, anything in ink meant it mattered. And here's your quirky tidbit of the night. One early scribe, it's likely a prankster, once wrote a marginal note in a medical papyri warning: too much ash and your gums will flee like frightened ducks. Ancient dental humor. Gotta love it. But this wasn't just about texture. Burnt bread had other properties the Egyptians valued. The process of charring seemed to purify the food, rendering it inert, safe, almost spiritual, much like how fire transformed offerings to the gods. Maybe it could transform stale bread into something holy, or at least healthy. So, burnt bread gets paired with salt, then mint, sometimes peppercorn, sometimes even powdered malachite, a green mineral crushed for eyeliner, and, apparently, mouth-freshening magic. You wonder what it felt like to brush with a glittering stone, maybe like chewing spearmint gum while licking a gemstone. Fancy. The mixing happens in small stone mortar. A teenage apprentice grinds slowly, the bowl vibrating with each circular motion. The paste begins to take shape, grayish, pungent. smells faintly sweet, but also earthy, like the wind after a fire. He dabs some onto a reed stick, testing its texture. Not too wet, not too flaky. Goldilocks would have approved. The formula changes slightly depending on region and season. In dry months, more oil is added. In plague times, more myrrh. Sometimes, beer sediment is mixed in, supposedly to appease Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plague and healing. 'Cause, of course, why wouldn't you put goddess bribery sludge in your toothpaste? You peer into a satchel belonging to one of the healers and spot multiple tiny jars. One is labeled with a faded hieratic scribble for strong teeth, not for weak stomachs. Intrigued, you sniff it. Distinctly regret it. Smells like someone blended garlic with river clay. Definitely for emergencies only. Even children have their own gentler blends, fewer abrasives, more honey, a touch of palm resin. Bribery in brush form. Don't cry, a mother whispers to her son as she rubs the mixture on his teeth. Your smile will make even Horace proud. Whether Horace cared or not, the boy quiets. And here's something unexpected. Brushing wasn't always a solo act. It could be communal, even ritualistic. Before weddings, participants often gathered for a cleansing session, rubbing scented pastes onto teeth and gums while chanting invocations to Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and apparently dental hygiene. You picture it, a row of nervous teens spitting into bowls while harp music plays in the background. Ancient prom prep. You reach a small home near the temple district. Inside, a woman stirs a bowl of paste with a carved ivory stick. She hums as she works, pausing now and then to sprinkle in more ash. Her husband, already dressed for a shrine visit, opens his mouth wide. She applies the paste like a painter touching up a sculpture. Intimate, practical, somehow sacred. And as she finishes, she drops a few words under her breath. No rot shall enter this house. You're not sure if it's a spell or just a wish, but either way, you feel its weight. The sun's higher now. Workers begin to file out of their homes, most with sticks or small jars tucked into their belts. Some chew on twigs with frayed ends natural. Brushes made from palm stems or sweet wood. Spit, rinse, and continue on their way. Daily hygiene, ancient dash style. You watch one man lean over a stone basin, pour water from a ceramic jug, and rinse his mouth with a dramatic gargle that echoes down the street. He grins when he sees you watching, teeth surprisingly white despite the years of chewing sandy bread. Burn it just right, he says with a wink, and it'll take the stench right out of your sins. He laughs. You laugh till you think about how something as humble and arguably ruined it. Burnt bread could evolve into ritual, routine, relief. The moment settles as a breeze sweeps in from the river, lifting the scent of charred wheat, mint, and temple incense. A cocktail of cleanliness and mythology baked into the daily grind. You exhale slowly. This is not just a quirky footnote in dental history. It's the foundation. Before tubes and fluorides and vibrating bristles, there was fire, bread, and people determined to clean what mattered, whether for their health, their gods, or their own reflection. You're following a narrow footpath now, worn smooth by centuries of sandals, toward a cluster of low buildings where the air grows denser with the smell of minerals and oils. The burnt bread was just a base, remember? But toothpaste, like most things Egyptian, didn't stop at functional. It had to be spiritual, symbolic, a bridge between the physical and the divine. Inside one of these structures, part apothecary, part temple, NXU, find two men hunched over a scroll. Their fingers are stained with powder, and a bowl of viscous gray paste rests beside them. They're not debating ingredients, they're debating intention. Because in ancient Egypt, mixing a dental paste wasn't just a matter of what, it was also about why. One man, older and bearded, taps the papyrus with a purple-inked reed. Protection from decay, he mutters, but not just of the teeth, of the ka, the soul. You blink. Toothpaste for the soul. The Egyptians believed in a tidy, holistic universe. Your physical decay reflected your spiritual one. And your mouth where you spoke spells, breathed sacred air, and kissed idols had to stay clean. Not just minty fresh, but ritually pure. Historians still argue whether this spiritual dental theory was widespread or restricted to the priestly elite. But the scrolls don't lie. Multiple cleansing of the mouth rituals survive in funerary texts. Some even depict Anubis, jackal, god of embalming, applying a kind of paste to the lips of the dead. Maybe not Colgate, but close enough. So, yes, toothpaste was about preventing bad breath, but also bad karma. You're handed a small jar, labeled with a sun discross symbol. This blend includes natron, the desiccating salt used in mummification, a tongue-drying, bitter dust that stings your nostrils, but when mixed with honey and fennel, becomes oddly appealing, warm, lemony, like licking a salted candy. And here's a weird one. Ancient Egyptians sometimes added powdered ox hooves to their paste. Okay? Why? Not calcium though. That's a nice bonus, but because they believed cows, sacred to Hathor, carried restorative energy in every part of their body, even the bits you'd usually leave in the dirt. One text describes this ingredient as strength-giving to the jawbone. You're not sure if it worked, but someone must have liked the crunch. You dug through a reed curtain into the storage room. Shelves of stone jars lined the walls, some marked for common ailments: sour mouth, bleeding gum, toothache. Others bear stranger inscriptions: protection from night whispers or against the bite of ghosts. You imagine someone waking with a mouthful of pain and thinking, yep, definitely, ghost-bite. Fringe theory alert. There's a school of thought that links dental health to demonic intrusion. Seriously? A papyrus fragment lists gnawing spirits that enter through the tongue and nest in molars. Chew on that next time you skip FLOSANG, and then you notice Eaton elaborate kit, lacquered in gold leaf and lapis. This belonged to someone important. A pharaoh? Maybe. Oh, one of his physicians. Inside are compartments for ash, natron, pomegranate rind, and something that looks suspiciously like crocodile dung. Yeah, we need to talk about the poop. Crocodiles were sacred, powerful, divine, and dangerous. Their dung, when dried and sifted, was believed to hold magical properties. Some used it in contraception, others in sunblock, and apparently someone thought it could ward off tooth demons. You lean in and sniff. It's earthy, surprisingly neutral. No obvious stench. Still, you can't help but feel a little skeptical. Would it really help your breath to scare away anyone who might smell it? And here's where modern historians differ. Some claim these bizarre ingredients were symbolic, meant to invoke divine protection rather than offer real medical benefit. Others argue that, by sheer trial and error, Egyptians may have accidentally discovered antimicrobial compounds in the most unlikely places. Either way, if you've ever accidentally brushed with charcoal toothpaste and felt like a forest goblin, you've had a taste of the Egyptian experience. Now, back to that golden kit. It also includes a curved stick part applicator, part tongue scraper. The wood is polished, smooth, and smells faintly of cinnamon. Carved into it are tiny lotus flowers, and a warning: use gently or Ra would turn his face from you, because, apparently, even gods disapprove of aggressive scraping. One of the apothecaries motions you over and demonstrates a technique. Start at the molars, work forward, don't forget the tongue. You mimic him, running the reed along your teeth with a feather-light touch. The paste tingles, a little spicy, a little smoky. Your mouth feels clean, but also, empowered. Toothpaste here wasn't just for personal hygiene, it was a ritual of renewal. Some households recited protective phrases during brushing. May no rot take root, may my breath carry truth. And remember, speech had power. Words could summon gods, hex enemies, or bless the harvest. You couldn't do that with a mouth full of gunk. You step outside and see children gathered for a group cleansing. The priestess leads them in song, brushing each child's teeth with a mix of date pulp and burnt barley. Their mouths glow with sticky smiles. You hear one kid whisper, "This tastes like mummy snacks." Another adds, "It makes me brave." You smile too. Ancient childhood in all its sweet weirdness. And this brings us to another curious fact. There were traveling pastemakers, sort of dental shamans, who offered custom blends based on your horoscope, your dreams, or your recent sins. Read your palm, then mix something up on the spot. You insulted your uncle. Basil and beer husk twice daily. Most of them were probably just con artists. But hey, so are half the wellness influencers today. As you wander back toward the river, the day wanes into gold. Temple bells ring. Offerings are being prepared. And somewhere nearby, a healer chants over a boiling pot of paste. For the mouths of kings and cowherds, he says, that their words may be strong, because in ancient Egypt, your mouth wasn't just for eating or smiling. It was a sacred tool, a channel, a weapon. Keeping it clean, physically, spiritually, symbolically, was an act of devotion. You're walking again, this time under the soft shadows of acacia trees, swaying in the late morning breeze. The scent of ground herbs and sun-warmed reeds wafts through the air. And in your hand, you're still clutching a smear of ancient toothpaste from that golden box. But now you're wondering, how did people even figure out what to put in their mouths in the first place? Let's rewind. Long before toothpaste was neatly stored in crocodile dung jars, it started with trial, error, and probably a lot of gagging. Imagine some poor scribe thousands of years ago accidentally brushing with crushed onion bulbs or rancid goose fat. Spoiler, not a hit. Yet, out of that wild experimentation came wisdom. You turn down a narrow alley and find yourself in a quiet courtyard where an old woman is drying herbs on woven mats. It's basil, myrrh, cloves, some crushed into powders, others bound into resin chunks. She offers you a taste of one licorice root, sweet and earthy, chewed not just for flavor, but for soothing sore gums. Suddenly, you realize this isn't just about cleanliness, it's about comfort. Mainstream historians agree the Egyptians had one of the earliest recorded pharmacopoeias, actual catalog of healing ingredients and their effects. But here's where it gets even more interesting. They didn't always separate dental from general healing. Toothpaste for a sore tooth might also be prescribed for a sore spirit. Your dentist and your priest might have shared a toolkit. Talk about multitasking. Still, scholars debate how much of this knowledge came from observation versus ritual tradition. Did they notice cloves numbed pain because someone chewed one during a toothache? Or did they use cloves because a god whispered it during a trance? Hard to say. It's probably both. The woman beckons you to help stir a clay bowl filled with a thick paste, this one tinged green with malachite dust. Don't worry, it's non-toxic. Probably. Malachite was thought to purify and ward off evil. In dental blends, it also gave a minty metallic zing. You dip your finger in and touch it to your tongue. Zesty, chalky, and somehow, energizing. If you've ever brushed with a trendy toothpaste that tastes like battery acid and eucalyptus, you're halfway there. Nearby, a boy balances a tray of unusual items: burnt eggshells, dried fig skin, ground ostrich bone. Lou, you raise an eyebrow. These aren't flavor enhancers, they're abrasives, grits, the stuff that scrubs. Here's your big historical fact for the day. Egyptian tooth powders, the ancestors of modern pastes, were often made with burnt breadcrumbs and pulverized rock salt. The bread came first burnt to cinders and ground until it was practically sand. Then they added crushed minerals like pumice or limestone to amp up the grit. Why? Because even in 3000 BCE, plaque was the enemy. Now, here's where things get spicy literally. They'd sometimes toss in cayenne pepper, mustard seed, or horseradish for stimulating the gums. You try a dab and instantly regret it. Your mouth is on fire. Your gums feel like they're being yelled at. Weirdly, you kinda like it. Fringe theory time. A few scholars argue that these painful additives were intentionally used to punish the mouth for sins, like you spoke ill of your neighbor, so now your tongue shall burn. Dramatic, sure, but very on brand for a civilization that weighed your heart against a feather. After death, you duck into a side room, kind of early Laband watch, as two students pound ingredients with stone mortar. The air is thick with chalk, dust, and spice. They measure not by weight, but by finger pinches, eye estimates. Gand your favorite, enough to quiet the god inside the mouth. Very scientific. One whispers that his master once made a paste from bat, guano, and red ochre. For courage, he says, completely seriously. Apparently, if your breath smelled like a haunted cave, people respected you more. This might explain why some tombs contain tiny jars of such concoctions, tucked beside amulets and cosmetics. Oral bravery, preserved for eternity. A nearby scroll shows crude illustrations of the mouth's anatomy, teeth, gums, and something labeled seat of truth. You trace your fingers over the ink. This wasn't just biology, it was philosophy. They truly believed your words, your honesty, your very character lived in your mouth. That's a lot of pressure on your molars. Suddenly, you hear laughter from outside. A group of teenagers is daring each other to try the black mix. notoriously intense blend of soot, crushed beetles, and blue lotus. You wince just thinking about it, but they dip their fingers in and paint their tongues like warriors. One shouts, "Now I can speak with Osiris." Another adds, or at least spit in his direction. You chuckle. Teens haven't changed much in 5,000 years. Let's not forget the hygiene rituals that surrounded these practices. Brushing wasn't a private bathroom and mirror event. It was communal. Families shared blends. Temples distributed cleansing pastes during certain festivals. There's even evidence that soldiers carried small jars into battle, like tiny tubes of Colgate for courage. You imagine a commander barking orders, spears, shields, toothpaste, 'cause nothing says intimidation like well-moisturized incisors. Some tomb inscriptions mention sweet breath as part of a person's legacy. It's listed right alongside virtues like bravery, generosity, and ability to wrestle hippos. And honestly, that feels fair. No one wants to be remembered as a great warrior. Terrible breath. As the sun begins to dip, you sit on a stone bench with your new herbalist friend. She passes you a small cup of rinse, a blend of myrrh, rosewater, and citrus peel. A tea, warm, fragrant, and oddly refreshing. You swish, spit, and sigh. Your mouth feels cleaner than it's ever felt. It's not just cleaner, lighter, okay? It's been unburdened of something ancient and sour. You think back to that first gritty smear of burnt bread and marvel at how far this tradition came, even within its own time, from desperation to ritual, from soot to science, all in the pursuit of something so simple, so human, keeping your mouth, the gate to your soul, in decent shape. And with that, the courtyard grows quiet. The jars are capped, the scrolls rolled. Another day of sacred scrubbing ends. You're up before dawn this time, standing beneath the star-stitched sky with just a sliver of moonlight guiding your steps. The air is cool, almost chilly, and everything smells faintly of damp earth and smoldering incense. You follow the glow of oil lamps down a narrow corridor that leads into something altogether different, a training hall. But this isn't for warriors or priests, it's for scribes and apprentices of the Per-Ankh, the House of Life, ancient Egypt's version of medical school, alchemy lab, and Hogwarts, all rolled into one. Inside, rows of students bend over, read paper, scrolls by flickering flame, scrawling hieratic script with sharpened brush pens. You peek over one shoulder. The page is covered in meticulous list plants, resins, minerals, and unsounding combinations. And there it is again, in bold, burnt breadcrumbs, listed as a base powder for oral scrubbing. You grin. Your crusty old friend made it into the textbooks. This place is where experimentation became documentation. While most Egyptians stuck to family remedies passed down in kitchens and temple courtyards, the House of Life was where curious minds got formal. Think medical internships, with more jackal-headed gods and fewer coffee breaks. You watch a student carefully grind a chunk of natron into powder, the same salty stuff used in mummifications, mixed with vinegar and burnt bread. It bubbles like a witch's cauldron, antiseptic mouth elixir, he whispers proudly. Another group tests combinations of date, honey, and crushed mint sticky, sweet, but reportedly soothing to inflamed gums. Mainstream historians have pieced together some of these recipes from the Ebers Papyrus and other ancient medical scrolls, including detailed notes on dental care. But here's a deliciously weird twist. Scholars still argue whether those recipes were meant for actual treatment or magical protection. In case your toothache was caused by a demon doing backflips in your molar, you follow a mentor down a hall lined with statues of Thoth, god of wisdom, scribe of the gods, and a fan favorite among overachievers. He explains that dental care wasn't just physical upkeep, it was moral maintenance. A clean mouth meant a clean conscience. You nod, remembering how even today, people say someone has a dirty mouth when they lie or insult. Ancient Egyptians took that literally. As the students work, an instructor unrolls a rare scroll bound in linen. It contains a master list of ingredients, each annotated with small drawings of clove pod, a sprig of myrrh, and oddly, what looks like a tiny loaf of burnt bread. This list doesn't just include the ingredients, though. Next to each one is a behavioral note. Burnt bread, it says, scrapes truth from the tooth. Myrrh closes the door to decay. Ground pearl grants brightness to the smile and honor to the speaker. You blink. It's not a recipe. Each paste wasn't just for brushing, it was a ritualized prayer, a daily affirmation. Suddenly, your modern 3-step dental routine feels disappointingly unspiritual. Then comes the test. 2 students step forward with a bowl of freshly prepared paste, thick and dark, with crushed lentil, husk, chalk, and cinnamon bark. One dips a wooden toothstick in the mix, then carefully presses it along his gums. You wince at the scratchy sound, but he doesn't flinch. The instructor nods solemnly and declares, "Your mouth is ready to speak truth in the tribunal of Osiris." No pressure. Fringe fact incoming. Some fringe researchers claim that certain Egyptian rulers required their scribes to undergo mouth purification ceremonies before major decisions were recorded, which makes sense if you believe it tainted mouth could spread spiritual rot onto sacred ink. The students aren't just brushing, they're swishing, chewing, gargling, even smoking certain herbs for their supposed dental benefits. One girl crushes dried papyrus bark and mixes it with salt water and a dash of goose bile. For courage, she says, as if that explains anything. You try not to gag. Nearby, a different group is arguing, animated and red-faced, about which abrasive is more effective, burnt barley crumbs or charred lentils. One insists lentils polish better. The other says barley gives a more spiritually neutral finish. You step back as things heat up. Clearly, this is the kind of debate that ends friendships. Outside, you're drawn toward the temple garden. The scent of thyme and chamomile drifts in the breeze, and bees hover lazily over lavender buds. A novice explains that this garden is both a pharmacy and a chapel. Plants grown here are blessed daily. He gestures toward a low shrub, Artemisia, believed to banish bad breath and evil intentions alike. You pluck a leaf and chew thoughtfully. Bitter, medicinal, slightly numbing. And here's your historical zinga. Archaeologists have discovered tombs containing bundles of dried herbs wrapped in linen, labeled for breath of the afterlife. So, your ancient Egyptians packed for the next world, including dental supplies. Back in the training hall, you join a student preparing a fresh blend for his final exam. He starts with what else burnt breadcrumbs, crumbles them into a fine powder using a bronze pestle, adds powdered acacia, gum, dried iris root, and a splash of palm wine. The result smells sharp, floral, slightly alcoholic, not exactly minty fresh, but oddly comforting. He paints a small strip of linen with the paste, lets it dry, then wraps it around a reed stick, ancient precursor to your modern toothbrush. You watch as he uses it in slow, circular motions, and you have to admit, he's got technique. Not bad for someone brushing with fermented garden mulch. Just as you think the day is over, the mentor offers you a final treat, a tooth blessing chant, softly intoned over a gently flickering flame. The words are old, melodic, and soothing. May your tongue speak clearly. May your teeth bite truthfully. May your breath carry peace to every ear it meets. The room falls still. Your mouth tingles slightly from the dozens of herbs, salts, and charred bread morsels you've sampled. But beneath it all, something lingers, a strange but comforting realization that even thousands of years ago, humans were desperately trying to answer the same question. How do I keep my mouth clean enough to speak well, eat well, and be remembered kindly? A flickering oil lamp dims as dawn begins to pour gold over the horizon. You take one last breath of that herbal air and feel it settle deep in your lungs. You've just witnessed ancient dental science, spiritual, messy, oddly beautiful at its most inspired. You're dragging your sandals across a stone floor now, stomach growling faintly as the temple shadows fade into something more domestic. It's early morning in a bustling workers' village on the west bank of the Nile, where breakfast smells like onions and beer, and children chase goats in between rows of mud brick houses. You've left the high halls of scholarly debate behind. This is where the real magic happens. Kitchen magic. You duck into one such home, greeted by the earthy aroma of baking bread and something else sharper, smoky a bit, burnt. A woman in a linen tunic grins at you, eyes crinkling as she fans a tray of flat loaves pulled fresh from a dome-shaped clay oven. Some are perfectly golden, others, not so much. Charred edges, blackened bottoms, useless for eating, but not wasted. She scrapes the blackened bits into a wide clay bowl, humming as she works. Good batch, she says, crumbly. Then she adds a pinch of salt, a drizzle of oil, and starts grinding. For teeth, she explains, like that's the most obvious thing in the world. Here you thought she was just tidying up. You sit cross-legged as she mixes her morning mouth paste. There's no scroll, no chant, no bronze pestle. It's experience. She throws in a few crushed mint leaves, the zest of a sour fruit that smells like lemon and vinegar's rebellious cousin, and finishes it with a splash of Nile water. What you now have is a thick, gritty concoction with the color and texture of wet sand. She scoops some on her finger and rubs it across her teeth with practiced ease. You follow suit and instantly regret. It's like scrubbing your gums with a savory, exfoliating scrub, but weirdly refreshing. This, right here, is ancient Egyptian dental care at the grassroots. It's no temple formulas, no divine incantations, just burnt bread, local plants, and generations of practice. Historians still argue whether this kind of oral hygiene was daily ritual, weekly chore, or saved for festivals and funerals. But here, in this village, it's clearly a morning must-do, like washing your face or doom scrolling before work. You glance around the room. Dried herbs hang from rafter sage, thyme, maybe even a bit of crushed henna. A woven mat in the corner holds a bundle of chewed sticks, their ends frayed like tiny paintbrushes. They're miswaks, precursors to toothbrushes made from Arak wood, but some look like tamarisk or palm. The kids chew them while playing like toothy pacifiers. Then there's the water. The woman gestures to a clay pot in the corner, cooled by the slow evaporation through its porous sides. It's sacred in a practical way. She dips a cup in and lets you take a sip, slightly gritty, vaguely sweet, and full of life. But she warns you, never brush with river water after the first flood of the season. Too many spirits, she says, smirking. And here's your quirky fringe tidbit of the day. Some villagers believed that brushing with Nile water during the wrong moon phase would invite crocodile breath, whether that meant halitosis or literal crocodile ghosts. Well, unclear, but best not to test it. You step out to find the man of the house returning from the granary, carrying a woven basket of barley and emmer wheat. His teeth are stained from wine and years of chewing tough bread crusts, but he smiles like a man proud of his surviving molars. He tells you the bread made for food and the bread made for teeth are baked differently. One is nourishment, the other penance. He laughs and points to the edge of the village, where children are roasting crusts over a flame, purposely blackening them. No good teeth without bad bread, he says, like it's some secret family motto. Honestly, he might be onto something. Burnt bread, it turns out, wasn't just a byproduct of poor baking, it was manufactured. These crusts were treated like an ingredient, not a mistake. Blackened until brittle, they were ground into powder and used for everything from tooth scrubs to dry shampoos to early forms of deodorant. Apparently, your burnt toast could have a second life beyond the trash bin. You visit another home where a teenage boy is making his own paste. His version includes crushed charcoal from the previous night's fire and powdered seashells. For sparkle, he mutters shyly, not meeting your eyes. It's a little gritty, but you admire the effort. Personal hygiene was, and still is, an awkwardly human thing. At the village square, a trader sets up a stall with tiny pots of pre-mixed powders. Temple blend, he boasts, with cinnamon, ash bark, and sacred myrrh. One dab a day keeps the dentist's priests away. Several women roll their eyes, but they still buy a pot. You get one too. It smells like something between a chai latte and barbecue. Weirdly appealing. And here's a nice historical nugget. Some archaeologists have found soot-stained grinding stones near residential ovens, confirming that some households regularly ground charred material for domestic uses, not just dental, but possibly for cosmetics, incense, and even paints. Burnt bread wasn't kitchen waste, it was resource gold. You take a final stroll through the village, pausing as the sun begins to rise high enough to warm the stone paths beneath your feet. A girl hands you a fig, sticky and sweet. Brush after, she warns, brandishing a toothstick. You smile, take a bite, and nod solemnly. Good advice is good advice, no matter the century. And as you pass back through the village gate, you take one last look at the smoky ovens, the crumb collectors, the paste stirrers, the mint chewers, then realize this place is where ancient toothpaste was born. Not just through trial and error, but through love, resourcefulness, and the world's oldest version of use what you've got. It's all pretty brilliant, really. You started with burnt bread, and now you're walking away with a mouthful of history. Slightly gritty, Definitely weird, but refreshingly timeless. You've left the smoky kitchens and sun-baked courtyards of the village behind, and now you're following the slow churn of a donkey cart down a dirt road. The cart's loaded with jugs of oil, sacks of natron, bundles of herbs and, yes, a wide bowl filled with what looks suspiciously like blackened bread powder. The cart driver hums a tune older than you are, casually flicking a fly off his linen sleeve. You're heading somewhere special. Today, a perfumery/apothecary tucked along a market path in the city of Thebes. Or maybe it's Memphis. Honestly, with the dust in your eyes and sweat on your neck, all Egyptian cities sort of blur together when the sun's at full blaze. As you enter the shaded archway of the apothecary, the world changes. Smells like crushed roses, myrrh smoke, and something vaguely minty. Shelves carved directly into the mud brick walls hold pots sealed with beeswax and cloth, each labeled in red ochre glyphs. Some contain ground lotus, others hold cinnamon or fenugreek. One prominent jar, tied shut with flax cord, is marked with the word Shen, protection. You feel like you're standing inside a spell book. A woman emerges from behind a curtain of beads, eyes lined thick with kohl, hair braided and scented. She regards you with interest. Looking for something to impress the gods? She asks. Or just something to make your teeth stop hurting? You shrug. Bit of both. And here's where things get weird, delightfully so. Because while this place does sell incense and body oils, it also specializes in early dental cosmetics. The woman unrolls a woven mat and sets out a display. 5 tiny pots, each filled with some version of tooth cleaning mixture. She offers you a sniff. One smells like burnt cloves, another like resin and lemon peel, a last like roasted fish, bones and chalk. You gag a little. That one's for bad omens, she says casually. Repels, curses, and in-laws. Historians still argue whether these concoctions were purely functional, mystical, or both. Some believe they doubled as oral charms meant to cleanse not just your mouth, but your spirit. And judging by the hieratic scribbles etched on the bottom of one pot, you squint at it. It says something about clearing breath before judgment. You can see their point. The woman begins a demonstration. She uses a reed scoop to take a bit of the blackened bread powder, mixes it with vinegar infused with marjoram, and then dips in a tiny bone brush, less like a toothbrush, more like a fancy microbroom. She gently scrubs a carved ivory tooth model, humming as she works. The paste fizzes faintly. Secrets in the acid, she says, breaks up mouth stones. You realize she's talking about plaque. Kind of. Close enough then. She lets you try one. You choose the one with the cinnamon scent. It tastes like if a red-hot candy had a gritty cousin raised in the desert. But your mouth feels oddly fresh after, even though your tongue now tingles like it licked a campfire. You mumble your thanks and discreetly ask if there's a sample jar for sale. She grins and wraps it in palm leaf paper. Guaranteed to impress Horace, she jokes, or at least keep the flies away. But here's your fun French tidbit. Archaeologists have uncovered dental mixtures in sealed jars in tombs that contain ingredients like crushed turquoise, gold flecks, and even powdered lapis lazuli. Yep, glittered toothpaste. Not practical, not safe, but undeniably fabulous. Apparently, good teeth weren't just a health thing, they were also a status symbol. Sparkle meant wealth, or maybe just excellent branding. Back outside, the market is alive with noise. You pass a man hawking lion milk soap. Don't ask, you don't want to know. And another who swears his reed brushes are blessed by the ibis god himself. You pause to watch a kid grind acacia pods with a mortar and pestle. For my aunt's mouth pain, he explains, serious as a priest. You nod, impressed. Even children here speak the language of herbs and healing. By midday, you've joined a small group listening to a traveling medic chant a list of tooth-preserving incantations beneath a sycamore. Some of the words are nonsense, others mention Ra, Sekhmet, and something about banishing the worm within the jaw. You raise an eyebrow. Toothworms again. These little guys just won't die. To be fair, the idea wasn't unique to Egypt. The Mesopotamians, Greeks, and even medieval Europeans believed toothaches were caused by worms gnawing inside the tooth. Ancient Egyptians had their own twist. They believed the worm could be coaxed out with herbs and smokes, or silenced with divine words. Modern science, of course, says Nope. But honestly, there's something charmingly hopeful about imagining your toothache as just a misunderstood little critter who needs a polite eviction notice. And speaking of divine intervention, did you know priests of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of plagues and healing, were sometimes called upon for serious tooth problems? According to one badly preserved papyrus, an offering of honey, myrrh, just burnt bread was made in a temple to soothe the jaw aflame. Historians still debate if that offering was consumed, burned, or simply left to ferment. Either way, it tells you something. Even the gods expected clean mouths before the sun drops too low. You pass by a small shrine near the water's edge. Locals leave offerings of mint, date, wine, and occasionally bread crusts. You smile. Even here, the legacy of burnt bread lives on. Not just as food, not just as filler, but as formula sacred, gritty, and gloriously improvised. By the time you make your way back to the cart, the jars jostling in the back seem less like ancient clutter and more like a pharmacy on wheels. You've seen firsthand how everyday Egyptians, from perfumers to goat herders, crafted oral remedies from what they had. No labs, no whitening strips, just fire herbs and a surprising amount of vinegar. You take one last breath of minty temple air as the sky burns pink with sunset and the river laps lazily at the shore. Teeth clean, curiosity sharper, and in your satchel, a palm-wrapped packet of burnt bread dust. History you can still taste. You settle in for the evening, and as the shadows stretch long across the Nile banks, you find yourself reflecting on how dental care wasn't just about hygiene for the ancient Egyptians. It was deeply woven into their rituals, beliefs, and daily routines, much like the way you now brush before bed, though hopefully with less ash and more fluoride. Remember that crushed turquoise glitter toothpaste from the apothecary that wasn't just for show. It's tied into their love of symbolism because a sparkling smile reflected a clean soul, and by extension, favor with the gods. As night deepens, you imagine the palace halls filled with the quiet scrubbing of teeth, not unlike the sound of a gentle stream, soft and steady. In the homes of the wealthy, servants might prepare a paste combining burnt breadcrumbs with finely crushed oyster shells, powdered herbs, and sometimes honey, known not only to cleanse, but also to soothe gums irritated by coarse diets, heavy in grains and salt fish. This mixture was like a spa treatment for the mouth. If your spa included a bit of sandpaper, grit, historians still argue whether these mixtures were purely practical or if they also served as early cosmetic products. Some evidence suggests that Egyptians used them to brighten their teeth's appearance, not unlike modern whitening treatments, although with a decidedly rougher texture and a slightly smoky aftertaste. It's fascinating to imagine an Egyptian queen's morning routine. After applying kohl to her eyes, she'd ask a servant to brush her teeth with this gritty, vinegary concoction, smiling at her reflection as if she were preparing to charm a god or a particularly discerning nobleman. You can't help but chuckle quietly, thinking how similar this is to our obsession with teeth today, except they probably didn't have the luxury of flavored toothpaste, though arguably cinnamon and myrrh might have made it more pleasant than some mint flavors you've tasted. You're suddenly struck by a small, almost absurd fact. In the tomb of a 19th dynasty scribe, archaeologists found traces of what they call tooth mud, a mix including burnt eggshells and ash. This mud was scraped onto teeth with twigs or small bone tools. While it sounds less than pleasant, it's likely this gritty paste actually did some good by mechanically cleaning teeth. So yes, the ancient Egyptians were essentially using primitive exfoliation, at least for their mouths. But there's a twist. The very abrasive nature of these pastes likely contributed to enamel wear over time. So while they fought plaque, they might have been wearing down their teeth layer by layer. Historians still debate whether the benefits outweighed the harm, or if the Egyptians accepted the trade-off as part of their oral health ritual. Speaking of trade-offs, did you know some toothpastes included ingredients like powdered charcoal? It was prized for absorbing odors, much like a modern charcoal face mask, but for your breath. Given the often pungent smells from cooking and the Nile's proximity, fresh breath was probably as essential then as it is now. By candlelight, you picture a scribe delicately applying a bit of this charcoal mix, making sure to avoid getting it on his white linen tunic. because appearances mattered as much then as now, and no one wanted to look like they lost a battle with a soot monster. Even more curious is that in some funerary texts, there are spells designed to cleanse the mouth of the deceased, ensuring their smile remained fresh in the afterlife. This shows how intertwined dental hygiene was with spirituality. Keeping teeth clean wasn't just for earthly comfort, but to maintain dignity and vitality beyond death. The Egyptians were masters of layering meaning, much like their stunning architecture and intricate art. A simple paste wasn't just a cleaning agent, it was a blend of medicine, magic, and social signal. You settle down, imagining those ancient nighttime routines, the soft scraping, the subtle sense of herbs, the gentle ritual that eased worries about breath, health, and favor with the gods. But as your own eyelids begin to feel heavier, you realize that history isn't just dusty facts, but little human moments, people trying to keep clean, feel good, and maybe even dazzle the world with a bright smile. The night grows quieter as you imagine the vast marketplaces along the Nile, where everyday Egyptians might buy or barter their own versions of toothpaste. Not everyone had access to crushed turquoise or oyster shells, but the desire for clean teeth was universal, crossing class lines like the slow flow of the river itself. You picture a vendor offering a mix of crushed, burnt breadcrumbs, pinch of salt, and fragrant herbs like mint and coriander. It wasn't just about hygiene, it was about comfort and social acceptance in a world where close quarters and crowded streets meant that bad breath could be a real problem. This simple paste likely evolved from a practical need to clean teeth after meals of flatbreads, lentils, and salted fish, foods that stuck around in the gaps in between teeth, much like the snacks you sometimes sneak after dinner. Remember how the Egyptian diet was gritty, filled with sand and dust blown in from the desert? That natural grit might have done a bit of scrubbing on its own, but not enough to stop the eventual tooth decay that came with high-carb diets. Historians still argue whether the more expensive toothpastes were status symbols or strictly medicinal. Some scholars believe that having a fancy paste was like wearing fine linen, a subtle way to announce your wealth and refinement. Others suggest that these mixtures truly reflected early dentistry, and their ingredients were chosen carefully to target specific dental issues. Imagine an artisan grinding burnt bread with volcanic ash to make a powder fine enough to mix with water or oil. This is where the earliest toothpaste recipes start to show an understanding of chemistry, even if they wouldn't call it that. The Egyptians were applying empirical knowledge. What worked, they kept. What didn't, they discarded tightly, reassuring that even thousands of years ago, trial and error shaped how people cared for their teeth. And then there's that delightful oddity. Some formulas included animal urine. Now, before you recoil, understand that urine contains ammonia, which acts as a cleaning agent. It's a reminder that ancient people used whatever was available, combining practicality with a little pinch of alchemy long before modern chemistry. Textbooks existed. Historians still debate whether urine was a regular ingredient or only a niche remedy known to select practitioners. You probably wouldn't volunteer to use a toothpaste with burnt eggshells and urine today, but you can't deny the ingenuity behind these attempts. Plus, you have to admire the bravery of the person who first thought, okay, maybe this weird smelling stuff will clean my teeth. The markets would be alive with smells of spices, incense, and those pastes, some oddly comforting and strange aroma, all at once. You can almost hear the quiet chatter, haggling, the gentle clatter of pottery jars filled with tooth powders by candlelight. You imagine a mother teaching her child how to brush teeth with these pastes, using a small stick dipped in the powder, gently demonstrating the ritual. It's a moment of passing down knowledge. It's not so different from today's parents reminding their kids to brush, brush, brush. You start to appreciate how much of this daily habit was about more than just health. It was about feeling cared for, connected, and ready to face the day or rest at night with confidence. And despite the differences, that feeling is timeless. Just before you drift deeper into sleep, a final, quirky fact floats up. Some tomb paintings depict men holding sticks that look suspiciously like toothbrushes, often near water jars. Were they the ancient equivalent of mouthwash? Did they gargle with Nile water or a herbal rinse to finish the ritual? Historians still argue, but the idea that oral hygiene was multi-step even then feels surprisingly familiar, with that gentle, We thought you relax further, knowing that the past is full of human moments in strange mixtures, all trying to keep a simple smile fresh and bright. As the sun begins to sink behind the dunes, casting the Nile in molten amber light, you find yourself wandering through a village where healing takes center stage. The air smells faintly of palm resin and soot. You're not here to bargain for lentils or gaze at murals. You've come for a toothache. It's one so persistent. Feels like the gods are whispering curses straight into your molars. You shuffle through narrow alleys lined with mud brick homes till you reach a reed-covered stall, humming with the soft clatter of bronze instruments. The village sandweek, that's what ancient Egyptians called their doctor's waves. You in with a knowing nod. His fingers are stained with herbs and what looks suspiciously like a crushed malachite. You gulp. There's a strange comfort in the ritual of it all. Unlike modern clinics where you fill out 17 forms just to sneeze, here, healing is holistic. Your mouth, your soul, and your dreams are all treated together. This swan believes that a toothache isn't just a dental issue. It's also possibly a sign of spiritual imbalance or even punishment from a mischief-making deity. Probably Tourette. She's the one with the hippo body and crocodile tail. She does not play around. First, the healer listens to your symptoms. It's not just your pain, but what you dreamed the night before, what you ate yesterday, and even which direction you were facing when the ache started. Apparently, toothache geography is very important. West-facing molars are angrier, he says, with a perfectly serious face. You nod, pretending to understand, because you're not exactly in a position to argue. He lays out a few common remedies on a reed, matte burnt breadcrumbs classic, crushed rock salt, mint, onion juice, and a rather dramatic-looking vial of goose fat. The burnt bread is still warm, not because it was freshly prepared. He just keeps it near the fire for luck. You lie back on a woven mat, and he begins to mix his toothpaste like a wizard, preparing a very specific curse. In goes the burnt bread, a pinch of natron, some mint for that fresh breath sensation. And finally, yes, a dab of goose fat. What follows is part massage, part incantation, and part oral exfoliation. The mixture is dabbed onto your aching tooth using a stick wrapped in linen, which functions suspiciously like a Q-tip if Q-tips were designed by people who also mummified crocodiles in their free time. You wince slightly at the pressure, but oddly, it helps, whether it's placebo, real chemistry, or the sheer shock of warm goose fat against your gums. The pain starts to dull. The sensei hums a spell under his breath as he works. Something about Thoth, the Ibisedic god of wisdom, bringing balance back to your jaw. Historians still argue whether these spells were meant as actual spiritual invocations, or simply a way to distract you while someone rubbed soot into your mouth. Either way, you appreciate the ambience. Then comes the real showstopper, a small amulet placed gently under your tongue. It's shaped like a scarapedal and made of glazed faience. No, you're not expected to swallow it, but it's believed. The presence of the beetle channels protective energy directly into your core. You wonder briefly if it's ever accidentally slipped down someone's throat. Probably. Ancient Egyptian medicine was many things, but ergonomic wasn't one of them. You rest for a bit while he prepares a take-home mixture. It comes in a linen pouch with instructions to apply 3 times a day or when the tooth begins singing. Singing, in this case, refers to the sharp, shrill pain that's probably the result of biting into too many figs that still had sand stuck to them. You thank him with a small bronze token, bowing slightly, as was the custom. But healing wasn't limited to specialists. Everyday Egyptians had their own household concoctions too. Burnt barley, red ochre, and ground donkey hooves made frequent appearances. And yes, some recipes called 4 brace yourself mouse tails, dried ground, and mixed with honey. This wasn't just a dental thing, Mice were considered medicinal Swiss Army knives, possibly the original multi-tool. You make a mental note to skip that one. Women, particularly mothers and midwives, also acted as domestic healers, especially for children's ailments. They used gentler blends, less burnt bread, more herbs, and sweet resins. Sometimes they'd apply a bit of pounded lotus root and whisper lullabies into the child's ear, hoping to soothe both body and spirit. It's a far cry from our modern take 2 and call me in the morning. The Egyptians were surprisingly advanced in some respects. They knew that inflammation around the tooth could be dangerous, possibly even fatal, if left untreated. Right. While they didn't yet understand bacteria, they did recognize that certain conditions worsened if ignored. Some skulls recovered from burial sites show clear evidence of dental surgery's cuttings, stings, even rudimentary extractions. Not exactly 5-star spa service, but better than leaving it to fester while praying to HATHOR. One fringe belief still floats among Egyptologists that dental rituals may have been linked to the afterlife. That is, your mouth needed to be clean and well-spoken for the weighing of the heart ceremony. Because if your soul's on trial, bad breath might tip the scales, literally. Capriwetic, really. That something as simple as burnt toast paste could become a kind of moral hygiene. As the healer pats your shoulder and sends you on your way, you pass others waiting for treatment. A merchant with swollen feet, a child with sunstroke, an old woman with her face wrapped in linen. Everyone here trusts in these ancient earthy cares, not because they're the only option, but because they're part of a rhythm as steady as the Nile's flood, as constant as Ra's sunrise. You joined that rhythm, toothpaste pouch in hand, walking slowly toward home beneath the pinkening sky. And in that moment, mouth tingling, pain fading, you realize something. Cons wasn't just about cleaning teeth. It was ritual. It was faith. It was goose, fat, and breadcrumbs in a scarab under your tongue. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. By now, you've probably picked up on a pattern. The ancient Egyptians didn't just invent things for fun. They did it out of necessity, with a flair for turning the practical into something just a little eccentric. And nowhere was this clearer than in the elaborate rituals they crafted around health and healing. You're not just brushing your teeth, you're aligning with the cosmos, warding off invisible threats, and participating in a long-standing relationship between humans and the divine. Or at least, that's how it felt back then. For anything, even dental hygiene was a ceremony, not just a chore. So tonight, step barefoot onto the warm limestone path that leads to the house of life. Don't let the cozy name fool you. This isn't some wellness spa in Aswan. It's a temple school library hospital hybrid. And if that sounds like a lot, well, it was. It's the beating, intellectual, and spiritual heart of ancient Egyptian medicine. And tonight, it's where you'll discover how your aching molars will be tended with spells, herbs, and maybe just a hint of divine intervention. You're greeted by a priest-physician. Yes, that's a real job title, wearing a leopard skin sash and an expression like he knows something you don't, because he probably does. He leads you past walls painted with sacred texts and through halls humming with whispered chants. Bowls of simmering herbs bubble nearby, releasing a sweet, earthy scent, part pharmacy, part temple incense. Let's say your teeth are aching again. Maybe that gritty bread talked about earlier has done its damage. You've chewed through more sand than a beach volleyball team's lunch break, and now your molars are staging a full-blown rebellion. The priest doesn't need an x-ray. He reaches for a papyrus, scroll rolled tightly and tied with a reed cord that's older than your great dash grandmother's single quotes as cat. He murmurs something under his breath and starts mixing ingredients. A pinch of powdered myrrh, some natron, a dollop of honey, and surprise a dusting of crushed onion skin. Ancient Egyptian toothpaste coming right up. You wince as he smears the mixture onto your gums, but then relief. Whether it's the honey acting as an antiseptic, the onion killing bacteria, or just the soothing sound of the priest's chant, the pain softens. It might even vanish, for a moment anyway. Placebo or not, you're grateful. And here's where it gets deeper, because medicine in ancient Egypt wasn't just about ingredients. It was about balance. Each illness was a disruption of Mat, the universal order. Healing meant restoring that balance, not just killing germs. So every treatment came with a little ritual, a side of divinity, and a heaping spoonful of belief. It's that weird-tasting toothpaste. It's also a spell, an offering, and a bridge to the gods. One famous scroll, the Ebers papyrus, lists over 700 magical formulas and folk remedies. It's one of the oldest medical texts in the world. And yes, it includes dental treatments. One cure for toothache recommends mixing cumin, incense, and onion and applying it to the tooth. Sounds spicy. The same scroll also mentions how diseases could be caused by worms in the teeth. Early dental mythology, long before we had microscopes. Historians still argue whether they really believed in literal worms or if it was a metaphor for decay. And here's your quirky tidbit of the night. Crocodile dung poultices. Yes, some medical treatments involve smearing sun-dried crocodile poop onto wounds or, in some cases, applying it as a contraceptive. Please do not try this at home. Scholars still debate whether this was symbolic magic, a misguided medical attempt, or simply creative problem-solving. Another curious fact: treatments weren't just chemical, they were spiritual diagnostics. You didn't just have a sore jaw. No, that pain might mean you forgot to give an offering to Hathor, the goddess of joy and beauty. Fever could be a message from Horus, a mysterious rash on your arm, possibly the result of offending a house god by accidentally stepping on a sacred beetle. In this world, medicine is personal, divine, and slightly superstitious. Okay, very superstitious. Now picture the tools, not shiny silver scalpels, but flint knives, bronze needles, obsidian blades. Ancient, yes, effective. Sometimes the priests may not have known about bacteria, but they knew cleanliness mattered. Instruments were washed with vinegar or beer, both of which, it turns out, can kill some bacteria. The overlap between practical medicine and religious ritual becomes almost poetic. They weren't just following procedure, they were acting out a cosmic drama. Let's go back to that. House of Life. Scrolls lined the walls, each one carefully inked with hieroglyphics that looked like tiny art pieces. They weren't just medical notes, they were sacred texts, believed to have power in their very form. Writing a cure was half the cure. Speak it aloud, and you amplify its strength. Add a prayer, and maybe you get a bonus health boost. Double XP for faith. Essentially, if you were lucky, you might have a private priest doctor visit you at home. Okay, but most Egyptians, farmers, bakers, tomb builders, stood in line at the temple, waiting their turn. Some carried chickens as offerings. Others brought bits of bread or cool water. The economy of healthcare wasn't gold, which faith and barter. You give thanks, you receive treatment. It's oddly communal, like a health insurance plan run by deities. Not every cure worked. Of course, some people got worse. Some scrolls recommend spells like drive out the demon from the blood. This doesn't sound like something you'd hear from a Harvard Medical School grad, but the effort, the belief that mattered. It gave pain a meaning. It gave the sick hope, and that's half the battle. And still, some of these remedies were surprisingly effective. Kani, a natural antibiotic. Onion, antimicrobial. K, natron, dried out infections. The Egyptians didn't just invent toothpaste. They built a whole medical philosophy around keeping things clean, calm, and cosmically aligned. You thank the priest with the bow. He nods solemnly, already turning to the next patient. Okay, maybe it's a man who hasn't blinked since yesterday. There's probably a scroll for that. You leave the temple with your teeth no longer throbbing, a strange taste in your mouth, and a small sense of having touched something sacred. And while modern science may have replaced natron with fluoride and crocodile dung with ... literally anything else, there's still something charmingly human about trying whatever it takes to feel just a little better. As the toothpaste story unfolds, you begin to see how hygiene habits intertwine with broader Egyptian beliefs about the body and spirit. Imagine a scene in an ancient home, the soft glow of oil lamps casting flickering shadows as a family gathers near a basin filled with water, scented with lotus petals. After carefully mixing their tooth-cleaning paste, they take turns cleaning their teeth, simple act, yet one steeped in a quiet reverence for health and balance. In Egyptian culture, cleanliness wasn't just about physical comfort. It was linked to spiritual purity. The mouth was a gateway to the body's overall well-being, and keeping it clean was thought to help maintain harmony between the earthly and divine realms. This holistic approach reflects how personal care rituals doubled as spiritual practices. You might picture a priest or healer advising the use of certain herbs in toothpaste, believing they could ward off illness or evil spirits lurking in the unseen world. A quirky detail: some toothpastes reportedly included crushed beetles or red ochre, adding color and texture. While that might seem strange today, it reflects a symbolic aspect. Red was often associated with vitality and protection. Incorporating it into toothpaste may have been a way to fortify the body as well as clean the teeth. You can almost hear the gentle murmur of incantations whispered over these mixtures, blending medicine with magic. Historians still argue whether these spiritual beliefs directly influenced the recipes for toothpaste or were a more generalized cultural backdrop. It's possible that some formulations arose purely from empirical observation of what worked best for oral health, while others had ritualistic origins. You also might be surprised to learn that the Egyptians used mouth rinses made from fermented mixtures like beer or wine, diluted with herbs after brushing. These rinses helped freshen breath and added another layer to their dental hygiene routine. Imagine swishing a bitter but aromatic liquid in your mouth, a ritual that connected you to both daily life and the mysteries of fermentation and healing. This all hints at a lifestyle where care for the body was a slow, thoughtful process, not rushed, but a gentle series of mindful acts. Whether a farmer, merchant, or noble, the shared goal was clear: clean teeth, fresh breath, and a feeling of harmony that prepared one for whatever the day or night might bring. As you picture the slow rhythm of these ancient routines, clink of ceramic bowls, the soft scrape of toothsticks, the faint scent of herbs, the scene calms you, bridging millennia with its steady, soothing presence. The tools used alongside toothpaste in ancient Egypt tell another part of this sleepy story: those humble chewing sticks. Imagine yourself standing beside the Nile, plucking a slender twig from a fragrant acacia tree. This twig isn't just any stick. It's carefully chosen for its natural antibacterial properties and the pleasant scent it imparts while you chew it to a soft, brush-like end. These miswak sticks were the toothbrushes of their day, used long before modern bristles were invented. You nibble on one, feeling the fibers separate, and gently scrub your teeth. It's a tactile, satisfying sensation that connects you directly to nature. The Egyptians appreciated that these sticks were biodegradable, easy to find, and effective, not to mention perfectly portable for a quick clean after a meal. A fun fact: some chewing sticks were flavored with resin or scented oils, enhancing the freshness of breath in a subtle, natural way. Imagine a little piece of pine or cinnamon wood between your fingers, releasing a soothing aroma as you clean your teeth. These sticks were sometimes stored in small reed containers, highlighting the care Egyptians took in their personal hygiene. Historians still argue whether chewing sticks were more common among the lower classes, while toothpaste powders were favored by the elite, or if everyone used a combination, depending on the occasion. What's clear is that chewing sticks have been an enduring oral hygiene tool around the world for thousands of years. Long before toothpaste tubes showed up in pharmacies, you might also find it interesting that some sticks came from date palms or named trees, chosen not just for cleaning, but for their supposed medicinal qualities. These trees' resins could help heal minor mouth sores or reduce inflammation, blending health benefits with dental hygiene. Together with toothpaste powders, these chewing sticks formed a two-pronged approach. It's the abrasive action of the paste, complemented by the gentle brushing of the sticks. It's a routine that feels both practical and oddly poetic, a slow, mindful way of caring for oneself that invites calm and focus. Now, imagine winding down your day with this ritual: the soft scritch-scritch of the stick, the faint, gritty texture of the paste, and the cooling herbal rinse afterward. A moment of simple comfort that echoes across centuries, inviting you to breathe out and let go. As we come to the final stretch of our journey through ancient Egyptian dental care, it's worth reflecting on how these early inventions shaped the story of toothpaste, and how they continue to ripple softly through time. Picture yourself lying back after the ritual, feeling the clean, slightly gritty residue on your teeth, the lingering scent of herbs calming your senses. It's a sensory experience that's both physical and quietly spiritual. It's a perfect prelude to rest in ancient Egypt. The act of cleaning teeth was not rushed or utilitarian. It was a gentle ceremony, a small daily nod to health, beauty, and balance. The burnt breadcrumbs mixed with crushed herbs and minerals became the earliest toothpaste, an ingenious solution that arose out of everyday life, resourcefulness, and perhaps a little bit of trial and error. You almost feel the patient hands of a miller carefully gathering leftover charred bits. The healer mixing ingredients with reverent care. A less-known fact is that some Egyptians also applied fine powders made from pumice or powdered ox hoofs to polish their teeth. While it sounds odd today, the abrasive nature of these ingredients effectively removed plaque, making teeth smoother and whiter, practical goal that crosses all cultures and centuries. Historians still argue whether these abrasives might have occasionally caused more harm than good by wearing down enamel over time. This ongoing debate reminds us that even the most ancient and thoughtful practices weren't perfect, but they were stepping stones in a long tradition of seeking better oral health. Interestingly, this tradition of tooth cleaning ingredients and methods traveled along trade routes, influencing civilizations beyond Egypt. Elements of Egyptian toothpaste recipes can be traced into Roman and later Mediterranean dental care, showing how knowledge gently spreads and evolves like a soft river carrying secrets downstream. Now, as you let your eyes grow heavy, imagine those ancient hands and humble ingredients crafting a blend that not only cleaned teeth but soothed souls. It's a connection between you, countless generations who've shared the simple pleasure of a clean mouth and fresh breath before drifting off to sleep. Slowly, your breathing deepens, the distant sounds of the Nile fade into a soft lullaby, and you feel cradled by time itself, a timeless ritual that whispers calm and care. Now, as we close the story, allow the quiet hum of history to settle gently around you. Imagine the warm Egyptian sun dipping below the horizon, softening the harsh edges of the day. The world slows. The air grows cooler, scented faintly with lotus and myrrh, wrapping you in a subtle calm. There's something deeply comforting about these slow, deliberate rituals from the past. They remind us that care and attention to small details like the texture of toothpaste or the feel of a chewing stick can be a kind of meditation, a way to nurture ourselves in a noisy world. So, as you drift towards sleep, carry with you the image of ancient hands working with humble materials, charred breadcrumbs, fragrant herbs, and smooth sticks. Feel the connection across millennia, the shared human desire for comfort and cleanliness, for ritual and rest. Let your thoughts float freely now, like a gentle river, slow and steady. Breathe in the softness, breathe out any lingering tension. Know that you are part of this long story, connected by a simple, soothing act. Sleep well, knowing that even the oldest inventions were born from care and curiosity. Tomorrow is another day, but for now, rest deeply.